Good evening, everyone. Today I want to talk about something really important. I sort of realized yesterday that it's kind of dumb that I haven't made a video about this yet because it's such an important concept when you're learning about this game. But I want to talk about defensive playstyles in this game, specifically in terms of spatial awareness and life leads. In other words, I want to talk about the art of running away in this game. And this can be very important depending on what character you play or what matchup you're in. But it's also something that when you play online, you only really see the most experienced players worry about enough and pull off in the right way. And that means to me that it's probably a good topic for an instructional video, but I guess we're about to find out. I was playing a lot of online yesterday and a couple of matches just happened in a row that really made me think about this and made me want to make a video about it. So I'm going to bring up some of those examples later, but first I just want to make clear that when I say defense, I'm not talking about blocking or parrying or ducking at the right time, stuff that you do when you're reacting to what the opponent is doing. I'm talking about how to play defensively in a neutral, how to be defensive when nothing else is happening. And as you're probably aware, in this game that has to do a lot with a technique known as Korean backdash canceling. Korean backdash canceling is an advanced movement technique in this game. You're probably aware of how it works. I think most people are these days. When I started playing Tekken, it was only really something that the most competitive players knew how to do. But I think since Tekken 7 came out and became so popular, the average skill level of a Tekken player has gone way up. And even casual players these days seem to at least be aware of the technique and practice it occasionally, even if they don't do it a lot in real matches. But if you want to learn how to do it, there are many different good guides out there on how it works, but it's the main way of escaping and trying to create space in this game. One question you get a lot is, how important is it that I worry about learning backdash canceling? Should I spend time learning it, or can I play really well without learning how to do it? And my answer to that is definitely spend time on learning how to do it. It's a fantastic tool to have in your toolbox, and in some certain matchups and situations, it will be absolutely vital to be able to win with your character. You definitely want to know how to backdash, for example, if you're going to play Zafina, because it's by far the strongest aspect of the character. Well, let's consider one of those examples of me playing yesterday. So I've been focusing a lot on Zafina lately. It's the character I'm trying to focus on right now. But I honestly feel like my Zafina has gotten quite a bit worse. And so I was sort of in this mindset of what do I need to do to change my approach and get back on track with this character. And then I end up in this match against a Hwoarang player on the Mishima Dojo stage. And this is an interesting matchup when we're talking about this because, okay, you have my character who's an escape artist, one of the best characters in the game at moving around, probably the best backdash, really likes to create space between her and the opponent. And then you have Hwoarang, who's good at many different things, but really excels when he's standing right next to his opponent and attacking a lot. So what you would typically expect to see in this matchup is me trying to run away from my opponent and my opponent trying to chase me down. This stage is also interesting because it's very narrow on the sides. Your back is pretty close to the wall when the round starts, and so it's very important to be careful in the initial scramble when the round starts, because if you get launched right there, it's usually just a perfect opportunity for a full combo and then a full wall combo and Oki, and you can lose something like 75% of the round in the first few seconds. And so I don't want to get caught in one of those Hwoarang attack vortexes. So the first thing I did is I just backdashed 3 times away from my opponent. But then something really interesting happened. My opponent ran in and he did one of those aerial strings that he has, not Hunting Hawk, the other one that you see as a combo ender sometimes. And I remember thinking that it was really clever by him because he obviously wasn't expecting to hit with it. He was just trying to get me to block it, and then that pushed me the rest of the distance to the wall. So now we're 3 seconds into the first round, and I already have my back plastered against the wall against one of the best mix-up characters in the game. He's super comfortable, and I might be about to lose. So this is something very important that I wanted to bring up, by the way. I was talking to many of my Tekken playing friends about this recently, how when you watch people play, specifically like intermediate Tekken players who have learned about backdashing quite recently, you can definitely do it way too much, and you can definitely be way too excited about doing it. And that makes sense because it's an advanced technique. It looks cool. It communicates to anybody that is watching, especially your opponent, that you have good execution. You care about being good at this game. So it's kind of like flexing a little bit. It's fun to do when you know how to do it, but you can definitely do it too much. And if you go and watch like online matches, something that you see a lot is one player just backdashing so much and so fast that for no reason they just walk themselves into a corner. Now, even though they probably have the better execution of the two players, they've completely lost the spacing game right away and walked themselves into a corner. So be aware of where you are on the stage, where the walls are, where your opponent is, and try and move accordingly. It's very, very important, and it's what I was getting wrong at the beginning of this round. So basically screwed myself over by moving too much too far right away. So now I'm at the wall, and I have 3 different avenues of escape. I can move left, I can move right, and I can try and go through my opponent, right? So trying to escape the wall with sideways movement is definitely a good idea and something that you should try and do, but it's also a position where you can be very vulnerable. For example, there are many moves in this game that are obviously specifically designed to wall splat people who are trying to step or walk at the wall. Down 4-3 from Leo, moves like that back 4 from Leroy, homing barely safe mids that you use to wall splat people like that. It's what Kanzumi used to use her back 2 for, but it was a little bit too good, so they took it away. But like splatting people who are walking at the wall is definitely a real thing. And if your opponent is aware of that and expecting it, then it's very dangerous for you. The other option, like I mentioned, is to try and go through your opponent. And the most classic sort of basic way of doing that is with a 2-throw. And this is something that I really recommend you do. Go into practice mode and try all of your different throws on the opponent and see what happens in terms of spacing and positioning when the throw happens normally and when it gets broken, because it can do really interesting things with what the characters are, where the characters are in terms of spacing, right? And a 2-throw typically crosses the opponent up and reverses the positioning when it happens. When I was thinking about that, I was reminded of Dottering. He's a very advanced, one of the best in the world Gigas players, and he uploads a lot of online footage to his YouTube channel of him playing Gigas. You should definitely watch him because he's so creative with that character. He can really capitalize on those weird armor moves and everything. He's an amazing player to watch, but I remember reacting several times to the fact that he does 2-throws a lot when he's being backed into the corner. And I was playing Gigas yesterday as well, and I realized that of course he does, because his character can't really move sideways. Gigas isn't good at moving sideways, but his 2-throw crosses the opponent up even if they break it. And that's another interesting thing, be aware of what happens on break, because some throws just get broken and then nothing happens. But in Gigas' case, even if the opponent breaks the throw, he still gets to reverse the positioning. So it's very, very easy access and low risk, and it genuinely does not matter if the opponent breaks it or not. You still achieve your goal of getting out of this vulnerable position. But let's talk about what I should have been doing instead of backing myself into the corner and becoming vulnerable like that. It's important to intersperse your backdashing with sideways movement, sometimes also with forward movement, footsies, trying to dash in a little bit, claim a little bit of space back, and then moving back out, and making sure that you're moving sideways so that you always have more space to move into if you want to backdash or avoid something. That's really, really important. So try and create spirals and circles, and always try and make sure that you have your back free. When we're talking about sideways movement, it's interesting. If you go into practice mode again and you move around and you sort of look at how characters pivot, you actually pivot around an axle that is centered in the middle of your opponent's character model. They're the thing that you rotate around, right? But it's also true that when you're locked into attack animations in this game, for the most part, that prevents you from pivoting. And so that means 2 things. First of all, the closer your opponent is to you, the better sideways movement becomes, because you travel further around them the closer you are to the center that you're rotating around. And that's why when people come at you with running moves, you want to try and delay your sidestep or your evasion as late as possible, because it just makes you more evasive, and then you create those great opportunities for whiff punishment when you sidestep a running move. I think that's how most players start learning about the magic of sidestepping. At least in my case, I remember clearly I was playing Tekken Tag 2, Law was doing legend kicks, I stepped one perfectly, and after that I started stepping a lot more because I had that eureka moment when I realized that I could actually do that, you know. But it also means that when your opponent is attacking, that's your golden opportunity to move around them because they can't really follow you around. If you're spaced out and you're sort of looking at one another and trying to move around, if your opponent wants to put you in the corner, he can sort of match and mirror your movement and you do this dance back and forth. But if he starts attacking or starts running at you, then you have a golden opportunity to slink away to the side and create more free space behind your back if you need to. So that's very, very important. Let's talk about the very different scenario of playing the exact same match on a wall-less stage. Now, obviously, I have as much space as I want to backdash into, and that's why when you see a lot of these defensively oriented characters, they like to pick wall-less stages because it just it's so much easier for them to just specialize in what they want to specialize in and not worry that much about the wall. And I actually had that strange experience of playing against one Hwoarang player on a very narrow stage, and then in the next match a completely different Hwoarang player on a wall-less stage. And I was thinking about how different it felt, and so I tried to do something where I was just really focusing on running away constantly, like to the point where I was imagining in my head that I was playing tag with my opponent. So I would try and hit him with something at the beginning of the round, you know, a cheeky low or something to establish a small life lead. So if the clock were to run out right now, it would be my win. And then I just backdash like a madman and just moving around constantly, making it very difficult and very scary for him to try and use Peacekeeper or a slash kick or something like that. He was standing around doing, you know, the big power crush move, the Marnslag or the rolling right kick or whatever you want to call it. But, you know, I was on the other side of the stage. I wasn't going to run in and eat that. And it was interesting how I could tell as the rounds progressed, my opponent was actually getting more and more frustrated and he just made more and more mistakes. And so that's something that I encourage you to try if you haven't, to not create space and then necessarily think about opportunities of closing the gap. You know, you're playing Miguel, his gap closers aren't very good. His 4-4-2-1 is duckable, the 4-4-2-2 is punishable. So if you're creating all that space and then you get impatient, you try and close the gap, you might actually just open up opportunities to for the opponent to deal damage to you. You know, you're mixing them, but mix-ups are always a double-edged sword, almost always. You also run the risk of getting damage to yourself, but if you have the life lead, just keep running. Be as elusive as you can and see if you can run the clock out. When you start doing that, it really sort of can change your approach to playing defensively in this game. And for some characters like Zafina, a couple of others off the top of my head, Elisa, Jack, I think Eddie, Kazuya to an extent, it can be very important for them. And so if you haven't tried that really slippery runaway strategy, then it can be very interesting, and I recommend you check it out. When you watch highlight videos of people playing this game, I mean, even the highlight videos I make myself of when I'm playing Elisa and stuff, something that you see a lot is perfects happening really quickly, very short rounds, you know, 15 seconds or less. And that looks really cool and dramatic and it goes well with music. But if we're going to be completely honest, what is really happening a lot of the time is you mix the opponent up in a 50-50, you guess right, you get a launch, and then you do that 2 or 3 more times and the round is over. There's actually not that much Tekken being played. Cynically, it could be described as you getting lucky 2 or 3 times in the span of 10 seconds, right? So lately when I'm watching Tekken, I actually enjoy much more watching players who really take their time, who are watching one another and moving a lot. When you get a really good match, when you see people adapt to one another several times during a single match, worrying much more about spacing, or maybe one of those matchups where one is trying to escape and one is trying to chase the other down and what happens there. It's the kind of Tekken that I like to watch. And I mean, if you're playing Dragunov, you probably want to pace the opponent with that running to as often as possible and get your advantage. If you're playing one of those characters who excels at pressure and constant mix-ups, you might not want to do this thing where you try and worry constantly about being very slippery and running away, because you might be playing out of your most optimal playstyle. But if you, like me, are into a character recently where you're supposed to worry a lot about that, then try it out. Try being extremely slippery. See just how evasive you can be and watch what it does to the dynamics of the match, because it's really interesting. And since I tried to just focus very hard on defense since yesterday, my matches that I've played today with Zafina have gone a lot better, and I'm also having a lot more fun using her. So yeah, there you go. That's what was on my mind tonight. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully it was interesting enough. I'll see you guys again very soon.